Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today something slightly different. We're going to take a review of the Carenado WACO YMF 5 for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. This was recently released and I couldn't resist picking it up on the Microsoft Flight Simulator store, so let's take a look, see what we think of it and whether it's a worthwhile product for your time. We're going to look at the flight characteristics, exterior model and interior of course. So here it is, recently added to the store. They gave it a very nice bright red icon, which I couldn't resist. Not many in the store at the moment, so it does stand out, but there we go. Currently priced at £12.49 in the UK. It promises to bring back the golden era of aviation. It is a relatively old design, originally from the 1930s as a military biplane trainer, but also this version, the YMF 5, was a design from 1986, based on the original YMF. It has a 300 horsepower engine, costs almost $490,000 starting price, and a maximum speed of 214 miles per hour. So let's take a look at the outside first and see what a job Carenado have done. As you can see, absolutely excellent work with all the rivets and reflections. All of the latest features of Microsoft Flight Simulator seem to have been included here, so we get excellent bloom, reflections, details, and a really accurate 3D model, which is just great to see. I especially like all of the cross wires and supporting struts that are used on the biplane sort of structure. They come across really nicely, make great shadows, and it's been really detailed the way it's been put together. So a big fan of that. And as you'll see, I had great fun filming all these exterior shots because there's just so many good angles. It's a great looking aeroplane in general anyway. Here we can see we can open up the second pilot or the passenger door, as well as adding ground power and chocks all through the built iPad inside the cockpit, which you can click on and off, which we'll see again later. And some nice details on the exterior model here. You can see it shuffling on the ground as the engine starts and idle thrust, which will have that effect on these big engines. You can see as well here as we start our takeoff roll, those shock absorbers. Look at the wheels as we start moving. You'll see they have a really nice animation where they compress and decompress as you go along the bumps of the runway. So some really nice detailing on the exterior model here. Plenty of bloom and reflections if you have your graphic settings set accordingly. This is all on high, except I have windshield reflections on ultra, but you get the excellent sense of the spars in the wing reflecting through on the shiny surface. So it is absolutely gorgeous to look at pretty much all the time you're flying it, and I've had great fun making this video with it. As you can see, we've had several liveries. It does come with 5 and they're all rather glorious, featuring several different registrations from around the world, but also quite different colour schemes which you can choose to your liking. I think they've done a great job, and what I really like is that your custom registration does get integrated well into it. As we can see, it's certified to fly at night, unusually for a biplane like this, so you can actually have some really fun night flights over some cities, reliving the golden age of the biplane as they sell it. You get really nice lighting effects. You've got the strobe lights, nav lights of course, and landing lights out the front, and inside the cockpit as well. We'll see later that they've done a great job adding some nice lighting there. The cockpit is really simple to use. It's laid out very easily. If you want to bring up the iPad for some extra features, you click on top of the control stick, and then as we can see, we have options for a few different things. This is how you can enable the chocks, the external power, and the uncovering of the front seat in front of you. A few of these are only available obviously whilst you're stopped and parked up. There are a couple of checklists on here, but they're only for takeoff and landing. It does not seem to include the full cold and dark style checklist that I was hoping for. So you can select the different options first, so you can choose how you want it to be. You simply click and then say done, and it will suddenly get the airplane set up in that way. So as you can see, if I click ready for taxi, it immediately has the engine started up for you. So that is a really simple way to get going. So it's very easy to get started in this airplane, even if it is cold and dark when you find it. There is of course a simple option as well. You can start cold and dark and find your way through it, as I did just by a bit of guesswork. A great effect there as the propeller stops and the aeroplane judders. I really like that. So here we go. I turn on the 2 fuel tanks, then have a bit of a think, turn on the battery. It seems to make sense to me. I debate the alternator, but then I think I do turn it on in the end. Yep. And the fuel pump comes on. This seemed to work for me, but again, this is not the procedure. We'll apply the mixture to fully rich and open the throttle a little bit, and finally start the key for the ignition and it fires up. So yeah, really straightforward, just nice piston aeroplane for you to enjoy. Nice effects on the cockpit instruments. We can see the gyroscope start to come to life as the artificial horizon levels itself. So Carenado are known for their general aviation aircraft, and they've done a great job on the instruments here. I like the airspeed indicator as well. It looks very authentic for not being a very modern one, so some nice detailing there. The reflections as well work well in the cockpit throughout the flight, which is great fun when you're doing a loop. The view out of the cockpit now is a slightly different picture. It is obviously a raised nose, so a tail dragger aircraft makes it difficult to see forward whilst you're taking off and landing. Here we can see when I press spacebar I get that landing view built into Microsoft Flight Simulator, and that works much better. At first it feels a little restricted because of that bar through the window, but it does give you the view you need over the nose, or at least a bit of an idea. Here you can see me attempting to land, and it makes such a difference. If I press it again and we drop into the cockpit, that's the default view, and it makes life really challenging. So one of the fun parts of flying one of these big tail draggers is the challenge of flying it and taxiing it whilst you can't actually see forwards. Really something to get your teeth sunk into as you learn the aeroplane. One thing to note is that in virtual reality this is almost completely mitigated because you seem to get a much wider angle. This is the default sort of sitting in the cockpit view in virtual reality, and it gives a much better sense of where the runway is, and of course being in 3D it helps with your depth perception for the landing as well. So virtual reality in this airplane is a real joy. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the review. Another nice little detail which I haven't seen much of in Microsoft Flight Simulator is these mirrors. They're on both sides, and at first I thought they were static images that just moved, but no, they seem to really reflect the environment. As you can see, I can change it for night, day, sunlight, and if I add clouds or remove clouds or even rain, the mirrors do seem to show it. So they are a really nice little detail. Here we go, as in some rain, and it goes all grey. So they really do work to some extent. So talking about sounds in this is a really easy topic to cover. They are excellent throughout. The startup sounds, the engine idle sounds, the takeoff thrust sounds. So let's just enjoy a few of those now without me talking over it too much, so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Sound effects are excellent all around, as you can hear. I particularly like the high-pitched noise or cracking as you hear the tips of the propeller blade going round at almost supersonic speed. Nice detailing. There are some great interior sound effects too. As we fly some aerobatics, you'll hear the creaking of the seat and some of the controls, as well as the wind noise change, and even the RPM increasing and decreasing. As it's a fixed pitch propeller, that means it will increase in RPM as we fly faster through the air like this. I really enjoy the flight model on this aeroplane. It is very noticeably not an aerobatic aeroplane particularly. It is a big heavy biplane, and it really feels like one, which is I think a great job by Carenado on this model in the simulator. You won't be getting into the air very energetically. It needs a lot of thrust. It has a lot of momentum to it, which you can see here. I'm just setting full power now. As you'll notice, with the brakes released, that is the acceleration, which is pretty realistic, and it's a nice change of pace from some of the default aircraft, which seem to have a lot of excess power. But that is a really nice start of the takeoff roll. A lot of momentum, a lot of weight in that aeroplane. Because of the weight, it does ride turbulence quite nicely. So here we are over the Golden Gate Bridge, being bumped around a little bit. I increased the wind for this, and the airplane has a real heaviness to it that helps it settle down even in those bumps. And it really, you can really feel the air riding over the wings and the airplane sort of keeping itself stable. And it does keep itself very stable. The stall characteristics are very pleasant. I had no issue with that. It just runs out of energy in aerobatics, so if you're trying to do loops and rolls, you will find very quickly that you run out of the energy you need if you're not careful. An issue I have had is this: the rudder is far too grippy on the ground. I think this is a problem with Microsoft Flight Simulator in general, but as you saw there, it just grips as if it's a go-kart, and the result is on takeoff some really strange behavior from the rudder. I've reduced the sensitivity and even then really struggled. Now, you would expect some difficult rudder control on a big piston engine, single piston engine airplane like this, but even so I found it to be ever so slightly excessive, especially on the takeoff and landing rollout. It became really difficult to control. It seemed to reverse itself left or right at times, but I think a big part of the problem is the grippiness as you touch down with the rudder control. So despite the benign characteristics in flight, which are really nice, really stable, it is still difficult, as we said earlier, to take off and land thanks to that view out of the front, the tail dragger aspect to it, and combine that with the rudder control on the ground, and it is a bit of a challenge. You have to be careful. You have to be very gentle on the brakes, of course, so you don't flip over on the nose, as well as pretty ready with that rudder to keep it straight on the centre line. Landing is good fun though. It is a good challenge to set yourself and a good bit of practice, and it becomes a very satisfying aeroplane to land, and I like that the flight characteristics allow that, especially on the final approach, to really feel like you are flying a proper tail dragger biplane with some weight behind it, and you really want to get it right. So yeah, very good fun. Here where you can see me having to use rudder and aileron to keep the airplane level on the ground just for the later part of the rollout. Very sensitive, something I've really had to practice. Here we are now going to look at some aerobatics, and you'll see that the RPM, as we put the nose down, I mentioned it earlier in the audio section, it will actually increase. I'm already at full throttle, but then as we allow the airflow to increase over the aircraft, it allows the RPM to go too far actually over the red line. So yeah, they've done a great job with that being modelled. I really like that. So it just shows the level of detail. And here we go, as we pull up through this loop, huge speed loss because of the lack of energy going into it, results in a bit of a stall at the top, and the airplane just flips over like that. So yeah, great flight model, really enjoyable, and you can really get some aerobatics. Stall turns, things like that are all doable. As I said, rolls and loops are not really what it seems to be designed for, but they are possible with a bit of care and attention. Flying from the cockpit is really the best place for it. You get that nice view out the front of the propeller, as you saw, with the lighting effects being cast really nicely on it, something I've not seen in the simulator done so well before. Also, we must talk about the fact there is of course nighttime flying approved in this aeroplane. As I said earlier, that is unusual, but it does have the included required panel lighting, and you get this fantastic view. This is a real joy to be able to fly around VFR at night. It's a real treat, so that is a great bit of fun. Here I am over New York enjoying the lights in the WACO biplane. So let's talk about virtual reality. This is a great way to experience this aeroplane because the freedom of movement for your head allows you to look up over the nose when you need to, as well as out the sides, which is where you'll need to do a lot of your looking, seeing as the front is so obscured. Here we have a slight problem where, as you can see, the clicking I'm doing is not matching up with the switches because the mouse cursor, unlike in the default aircraft, is not applying itself in 3D to the panel properly. So I'm getting a double image, and it makes it difficult to select switches in virtual reality. That is something I would hope to see fixed in the future. Performance wise, I am running this on an i7-10700K and an RTX 3080 with 32GB of RAM, and I found this airplane to be no more demanding than many of the other aircraft included, and it's certainly not as demanding as the airliners, which is great considering how many nice effects and details it has. These are of course applicable in VR and non-VR, such as the rain, so it is overall not a big performance hog on the flight simulator. So overall, what is my conclusion? I think this is a good value add-on. For £12.49 it seems to come with some really nicely crafted liveries, a lot of great effects, the versatility of being night flying VFR as well as daytime, and a really good flight model that does feel like a heavy biplane, which I really like. You really feel like you're in the thing. The sound effects are exemplary. It really sounds fantastic the whole time, so that makes me think the package is well worth the money. Some difficulties in the approach and landing make it a challenge, so although it is easy once you're in the air, there are some difficulties in takeoff and landing. In particular, I'd like to see this rudder control fixed. I'm hoping it's not something I'm doing, but I do think there's a bit of an issue with the grippiness on the runway for the tail wheel. Other than that, when you're in flight, it is a complete joy, and as I said, very stable and docile. Stalling is not an issue, and you can get some aerobatics out of it if you are careful. So I can easily say that this is a product that I think a lot of people would enjoy, especially if you're looking to do some VFR scenery exploring in Microsoft Flight Simulator, such as here we are flying over New York. It's absolute joy. It's really nice low speeds to allow you to cruise by and enjoy it. If you have virtual reality, this is also excellent for that, aside from the slight issue with using the mouse cursor on the instrument panels. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Do let me know what you think in the comments, and of course do please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more flight simulator content, including a lot of Airbus tutorials. And here we are, one final piece of advice I learnt the hard way. Do make sure that parking brake is off before you touch down, or this will happen to you.